Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that affects almost every software project over time, system entropy, that drift towards, well, chaos. And we're zeroing in on a specific costly form, architecture debt.
Right. And it's important to distinguish this from just, general technical debt. Architecture debt is different. It's about these non-local concerns.
Okay, hold on. Non-local concerns. What exactly are we talking about there? Break that down a bit.
It means the problem isn't isolated in one spot, like a badly written function. You can't just look at one file and see it. Architecture debt lives in the connections, the relationships between different parts of the system.
Ah, okay, so it's in the wiring diagram, not inside the components themselves.
Exactly. And that's why your standard code analysis tools, they often miss it entirely. They're good at looking inside a file, but not so good at mapping out that whole web of dependencies across the system graph.
Right. They see the trees, but not the forest structure or how tangled the roots are, maybe.
That's a great way to put it. And that's what makes it so hard to deal with using the usual approaches.
Okay, so if the problem is tracking these tricky spread out relationships, our mission today really is to figure out how we can actually quantify the cost of not fixing them. We need to get past that difficult conversation architects often have.
Oh, you mean the I need 6 sprints to refactor this and you get 0 new features conversation?
Exactly that one. We need a way to show the business with numbers that fixing the stuff isn't just cleaning up. It has a real, tangible return on investment.
Precisely. And to do that, to put a number on something like architecture quality, you really have to tap into the project's history. You need 3 key pieces of information.
Okay, what are they?
First, obviously the source code. You need to reverse engineer it to see the static structure, who calls what, who inherits from whom, that sort of thing.
Makes sense. What's second?
Second is the revision history. So your Git logs, your SVN history, whatever you use. This shows how files have changed together over time, co-evolution. It tells you about the human activity pattern.
Okay, structure and activity. What's the third leg of the stool?
That's the issue information. Your bug tracker, data Jira, Bugzilla, etc. This gives you the why. Why did these files change together? Was it planned feature work? Or was it fixing a defect caused by that coupling? That connects the structure and activity to actual cost or pain.
Right, so combining the what code structure, the how often, history, and the why it hurt issues lets you build that quantitative case.
Exactly.
So gathering all that sounds like a lot of complex data points and relationships. If our usual tools struggle, how do we actually visualize this stuff? How do we measure it?
That's where a really powerful tool comes in, one borrowed from complex systems engineering, actually. It's called the Design Structure Matrix, or DSM.
Or design structure matrix,
Yeah.
DSM. Okay, tell me about that.
Think of it as a square grid. You list all your files or components down the rows, and then you list the exact same files or components in the exact same order across the columns.
Got it, like a mileage chart on an old map.
Pretty much. And then in the cell where, say, file A's row intersects with file B's column, you put a mark if file A depends on file B.
Okay, and what kind of dependencies are we marking in there?
Well, 2 main types, reflecting the data we just talked about. First, the structural dependencies. These are the static ones from the code itself, method calls, inheritance, the stuff a compiler sees.
Right, and the second type?
That's the crucial one, evolutionary dependencies. This comes from the revision history. If file A and file C consistently change together in the same commits over and over again, we mark that relationship too, even if there's no direct structural link showing in the code.
Ah, so that's how you capture that hidden coupling we talked about earlier, the stuff that happens because developers know they have to touch both files, even if the code doesn't explicitly connect them.
Precisely. That code change history is often where the real architecture debt is hiding.
So when you build this DSM, what does a good one look like? What are you hoping to see?
Ideally, 2 things. First, you want it to be sparse. Lots of empty cells. That means low coupling, high modularity files aren't tangled up with too many others.
Okay, sparseness. Less ink is better. What else?
Second, you want it to be lower diagonal.
Lower diagonal. Okay, walk me through that. Does that mean all the marks, all the dependencies, should ideally fall below the main diagonal line running from top left to bottom right?
Exactly right. If all your marks are in that bottom left triangle, it means you have no cycles. Files only depend on things below them in the hierarchy, files that were listed earlier in the matrix order. It suggests a clean hierarchical structure.
No circular dependencies where A depends on B, B depends on C, and C depends back on A.
Correct. Those cycles are killers for maintainability.
Okay, sparse and lower diagonal, that's the ideal. But I suspect reality is often messier.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where the evolutionary data becomes so incredibly revealing.
Uh,
Let's take a real-world example, the Apache Camel project.
okay, the integration framework. What did its DSM show?
Well, if you only looked at the structural dependencies, just the code calls, the DSM looked pretty decent. Reasonably sparse, not too alarming. You might think, okay, this architecture is in fairly good shape.
Hmm.
But when you overlaid the evolutionary data, the code change information from the commit history, the picture changed dramatically.
How so?
The matrix suddenly became much, much denser, lots more marks. And crucially, tons of marks appeared above the main diagonal.
Ah, so the history revealed hidden connections and cycles that the static code view didn't show at all.
Bingo. Strong evolutionary coupling, high architecture debt, hidden complexity. And the really compelling part, the actual architects on the Camel project, when shown this analysis, they confirmed it. They knew qualitatively that making changes was painful and complex, touching many parts. The DSM analysis provided the quantitative proof of why it felt that way.
That's powerful. It validates the gut feelings developers and architects often have, but struggle to articulate to management.
Exactly. It moves it from subjective feeling to objective data.
Okay, so the DSM helps us find the debt by visualizing these bad relationships. Now, how do we connect that to the actual maintenance cost? This leads us to the idea of hotspots, right?
Yes. Hotspots are basically clusters of files or components, often connected by these problematic architectural relationships, that contribute disproportionately to your maintenance effort, particularly defects. They're where the design flaws, these anti-patterns, are really costing you.
Because high coupling and low cohesion, which these flaws represent, inevitably lead to more bugs and harder changes.
That's the core idea.
Yeah.
So we use the DSM analysis not just to see the structure, but to actively hunt for specific known architectural anti-patterns that are likely driving up costs in these hotspots.
Can we walk through a few of the key anti-patterns this analysis looks for? Maybe give some simple analogies.
Sure, let's take three common ones. First, modularity violation.
Modularity violation sounds like something isn't properly contained, like you change something seemingly unrelated over here and it unexpectedly breaks something way over there.
Perfect. It's when files that have no direct structural dependency still change together all the time. They share some hidden knowledge, some secret handshake that isn't properly encapsulated. It violates the modularity principle.
Got it. Okay, what's number two?
The classic cyclic dependency, sometimes called a clique. This is where you get that loop we mentioned. A depends on B, B on C, C back on A, or maybe it's a larger group, all tangled up.
Right, the everything depends on everything else not. Makes sense why that's bad. You can't change anything in isolation.
Exactly. It creates architectural paralysis. Modifications ripple through the whole cycle.
And the third one you mentioned?
Unhealthy inheritance. This one's a bit more subtle. It's usually when a parent class ends up depending on one of its child classes, or when code using the hierarchy needs to know about both the parent and specific children.
Wait, why is the parent depending on the child bad? Isn't inheritance supposed to flow downwards?
It is. The whole point of a base class is to be general and stable. It shouldn't need to know about the specifics of its subclasses. When it does depend on a child, any change in that specific child can break the general parent, violating encapsulation and making the whole hierarchy fragile. It kind of defeats the purpose.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Can we see these anti-patterns in action? You mentioned Apache Cassandra earlier.
Yeah, Cassandra provided some really clear, quantifiable examples. The analysis found a distinct clique involving three specific files. Let's call them 4, 5, and 8. They formed a tight cycle of dependencies.
And the data showed this wasn't just theoretical.
Right. The historical data confirmed these files were changed together frequently and were associated with a high number of defects. The pattern matched the pain.
And what about the unhealthy inheritance? Was there an example there too?
Oh yeah, a really striking one involving classes named stable and stable-reader. The structural analysis showed stable, the parent, had a dependency on stable-reader, the child, the classic anti-pattern.
Okay, so the structural flaw was there. But what did the history add?
This is where it got dramatic. The evolutionary analysis, the co-change count between these two files in the DSM cell, it was 68.
68. You mean developers had to modify both the parent and child class together in 68 different commits?
That's what the data showed. 68 times a change potentially rippled incorrectly up the hierarchy, or at least required coordinated changes across that supposedly clean abstraction boundary. That single number, 68, quantifies the friction, the debt, caused by that unhealthy relationship.
Wow, that's not just a code smell, it's a quantitative measure of ongoing pain.
Exactly. It's the kind of number that starts making a business case.
Okay, so we found the anti-pattern, we see the structural flaw, and we have numbers like 68 code changes showing the historical friction. But we still need that final piece for the CFO, right? The return on investment. How do we translate 68 code changes into dollars or person months saved?
We do that by correlating these anti-patterns and hotspots directly with the cost metrics primarily, the number of bug fixes associated with those files, and maybe the churn, like lines of code change during fixes.
So you identify the files involved in, say, that Cassandra clique or the unhealthy inheritance.
Yes. And then you look at the issue tracker data.
Yeah.
How many bugs were filed against those specific files over the last year or 6 months, whatever period you analyze? How much effort went into fixing them?
And that gives you a baseline cost for living with that debt.
Precisely. Then you can estimate the savings. If we refactor this clique, if we fix this unhealthy inheritance, we expect the bug rate in these files to drop maybe down to the project average for healthy files. You can then calculate the expected reduction in bug fixing effort.
Can you show how that calculation plays out? You mentioned a case study.
Yes, the SS1 case study with SoftServe, a large software company, the analysis there was fascinating. It pinpointed 3 main hotspots, clusters of architecturally problematic files, about 291 files in total.
Okay, 291 files identified as hotspots. What was their impact?
Get this. Those 291 files were responsible for 89% of the project's total defects found in the analyzed period. That's 265 bugs traced back primarily to the issues in those hotspots.
Wow, 89% of the bugs from just those specific areas. That's incredible leverage.
It really is. It tells you exactly where to focus your efforts.
So what was the proposed fix and what did it cost?
The architect estimated that refactoring those 3 key hotspots, breaking the cycles, fixing the modularity violations, etc., would take about 14 person-months of effort.
Okay, 14 person months investment. Now, the crucial part, what was the expected payoff?
They calculated the expected reduction in bug fixing time based on bringing the defect rate of those 291 hotspot files down to the project's average defect rate per file.
And the result?
The expected annual savings were calculated to be 41.35 person-months.
Let me get this straight. Invest 14 person months once. Get back over 41 person months every year in saved bug fixing time.
That was the projected ROI based on their historical data.
Yeah.
It transforms the conversation from, please let me clean this up, to here's an investment with a nearly 3x return in the first year.
That's the kind of quantitative argument that gets budgets approved.
Absolutely. And it's not just a guess. The analysis also tells the architect how to refactor. It points out the specific dependency in a cycle that should be broken, or which function needs to move in an unhealthy inheritance. It guides the refactoring for maximum impact.
Which increases the chances of actually achieving that predicted ROI.
Exactly. It makes the refactoring precise and targeted.
And then you're saying this whole process,
Yeah.
extracting the data from Git and Jira, analyzing the code, building the DSM, finding anti-patterns, calculating the potential ROI, this can all be automated.
Yes, entirely. All those steps can be scripted and automated. You can build tools that run this analysis continuously, maybe as part of your CI/CD pipeline.
So you could have like an architecture debt dashboard constantly monitoring the health of the system.
That's the vision. Architecture debt is real, it's costly, and it's often hidden. But by systematically analyzing structure and history, using tools like the DSM, we can drag it out into the light, quantify it, and make data-driven decisions about refactoring that demonstrably pay off.
It really changes the game from reactive firefighting to proactive architectural management based on evidence.
It really does.
Which leaves us, and you, our listeners, with a final thought to consider. If this kind of deep architectural analysis can be fully automated and run continuously, how does that change the traditional role of the software architect? What does their day-to-day look like when the system's structural health is constantly being monitored and quantified? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.